All right, we're in here. We are live. We are live, and I'm coming at you with five. Welcome to another edition of Gavin Richard Presents. I'm your good and gracious host, Gavin Richard, here on my channel, YouTube, gboot2786. And we have again a friend of the show and a fellow YouTuber. Uh, oh, hold on. That's my YouTube page up already. I have those up simultaneously in another tab when I look at the channel. But with start over. We're joined, ladies and gentlemen, by a friend of the show, Mr. Shawn James. As you know, Shawn is an author of several books, including the John Haynes series, and he's also the author of another book called The Man Crisis. He's written over 70 books. Is that right, Shawn?
Yes, that's right. I have written over 70 books.
Over 70 and counting.
Yes. I have
And
several more coming out this year.
okay, well, tell everyone what those books will be about, or where they can get the ones that are published.
Well, the ones that are available as part of the 2020 catalog are John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, which is available now. And just this week, I have released ISIS, the Main Event. And coming this fall will be the Easteam series book, Easteam Blast from the Past, and the new novel, Eternal Night, which is a vampire novel.
Okay, cool. That's what's up. And I take it it's going to be different than Twilight.
Definitely different than Twilight. It's going to be much darker and more connected to vampire lore.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. Most vampire series I've found now, especially not just even vampire, but even the werewolf stuff has gotten soft.
This one is as hard as it gets. It's this. You want horror? This is the one you're going to want to pick up.
All right, well, keep that in mind. And also, who knows, maybe a movie deal one day.
I can only hope.
All right, keep pushing, man. That's all I can tell you.
And
That's all you can do.
that's what I plan on doing.
Right. So for today, our topic, Shawn and I had talked about this. We were discussing the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I actually, coincidentally, Shawn, when I saw your Facebook post about it, I was actually doing some research for my next book, and I just was looking up something on black radio stations, and it so happened when I Googled it, the Telecommunications Act was a part of that too. And we'll get into, I guess, how that even impacted Black America greatly. But the other thing too is that act, which was in 1996, this was signed by then President Bill Clinton, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was signed by President Bill Clinton after it was passed by the Republican Congress.
Okay. Yeah. And so one of the things that the act did, that it has been criticized, many don't know this, is that it's considered to give big corporations more access to buy out smaller businesses. In particular, in the media, for instance, when you look at Viacom, for instance, Viacom basically owns anything associated with Paramount Pictures, MTV, CBS, uh, what else? BET, VH1, Comedy Central. Basically, it controls all of those channels that are with the Viacom family. So I have those statistics that I can put up in the chat so everyone can look at that. But Shawn, what did you want to say about it, particularly?
Well, I'm going to talk about before the 1996 telecommunications bill, because before this bill was passed, we had federal regulations which stated that only a person could only own one television station, one newspaper, and one radio station in a metropolitan area. And that was done so that there would be competition, and so one person wouldn't be able to saturate the airwaves with one viewpoint. And that policy was meant so that we could have a free press and we could get different viewpoints, diverse viewpoints, and differences of opinion. Moreover, it was also so we could get objective journalism. So that before that law was passed, we only one person could own a newspaper, a TV station, and a radio station in one metropolitan area.
That's correct.
that was the bit. What happened with the telecommunications bill was it deregulated the marketplace and allowed for people to buy multiple radio stations, multiple TV stations, and that practically changed our media, because instead of us getting that diversity of viewpoints and diversity of thought in our newspapers, our magazines, our television shows, and our radio stations, we started to see a consolidation of media under 6 companies at one time in the early 2000s, and now it's down to 4. And now we have about 4 people controlling what everybody sees, what everybody reads, what everybody hears, and what possibly everybody will be able to think about in our media. And that's really dangerous, because you really don't want your media consolidated like that, because we can't really get any sort of diversity of thought or any differences of opinion as related to media.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, I put the link up from Wikipedia, which gives the definition of media cross ownership. What you say is correct. Those laws, basically by the FCC, were what you call anti-monopoly laws, where they tried to prevent, a monopoly on a certain market. People from cornering that. And what this bill did, unfortunately, changed all of that, and it also impacted Black America. For instance, if you go to the website blackbusiness.com, I was doing some research on this. They report this was in 2015, obviously, but prior to 1996, Federal Communications Commission regulations ruled it was not in the public's best interest for any single entity to hold more than one broadcast license in the same community. Greater diversity in programming would come from a greater number of owners. The law remained that way until 1996. In 1996, under President Bill Clinton, the law changed and allowed anyone to enter any communications business and allowed any communications business to compete in any market against each other. It was a total deregulation of the communications industry that had a devastating effect on Black-owned communications businesses and radio stations. So, just so everyone knows, according to these stats, in 1995, there were 146 radio stations in America that were owned by African Americans. And this was obviously in June 9, 2015, those statistics now state that there are only 68 remaining, according to the National Association of Black-owned Broadcasters. So this really devastated Black America in a way, because our voices, where we had independent disc jockeys, because back then everyone obviously listened to the radio, but now, of course, we have the internet, which allows more access to other artists, but it's changed things now. So as a result of that, we don't have, I guess, a strong media presence in the radio market as we used to, and even the television market, even though that was limited.
That's true, because it really did a devastating damage to the Black radio market, the Black newspaper market, and even the few TV outlets. Now, I know about what it did to radio because I was read about it, and I had researched it for my novel, The Temptation of John Haynes, because one of the things that John Haynes' character tries to do is he tries to save his friend's radio station, because he knows how important it is to have a Black radio station that presents our viewpoint. And the Telecommunications Bill of 96, I can tell you from what happened here in New York, to numerous radio stations that were under Black ownership, they practically were gone by about 2002, 2003. And we went from having about 4 or 5 radio stations to right now we only have one, WBLS, which I think is the only Black-owned radio station still remaining on the air. Several of them that were producing things like R&B music and promoting Black music, like 98.7 KISS FM, they no longer exist anymore. And other stations that used to do gospel, like WWRL and I think WLIB, which was also Black-owned, they no longer are around anymore. I mean, WLIB still does gospel, but it's not like it used to do. But I saw so many stations die as related to the telecommunications bill. And even in the area of publishing, we lost so many black-owned newspapers because corporations would come in, buy those black newspapers out, and all of that stuff was done practically silencing the voice of black people in the media. And what a lot of black people don't understand the impact of us being silenced is the fact that we cannot get our voices out there to present our viewpoint. And when others present our viewpoint, they control our narrative and they're the ones telling our story. And that's not really good, because what they're going to do when you have corporations telling the stories of black people is you're going to have them promoting stereotypes as the standard for black people instead of us telling our own story on our own platforms in our own words.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that very well could have helped out, when we talk about this with Bill Cosby. You notice that black media was virtually silent when all of that was going on. Those that were present who were in black media tried to really stay away from it, like your Tom Joyner, who just retired. Um, and also the black television networks that we had that really didn't cover it. I mean, even BT. BT markets itself to black people. It is not black owned. It's owned obviously by Viacom when Bob Johnson sold it in 2000 so he could get into the airline industry. And I
Yeah.
don't think that worked out for him quite well. And I don't know, maybe, I don't know if anyone can confirm this, but is TV1 still black owned? I've heard
I
rumors.
think TV One is still owned. From what I did an interview with Obsidian about a year or so ago. I think it's still owned by a black woman, but it's still questionable
Kathy
because there's.
Hughes?
I think it's still owned by her, but I don't know because I think they're still under that Viacom umbrella. So a lot of these things, they're owned or they're subsidized by these corporations. So even though they have a black face running it, it's still run by those corporate interests like Viacom.
Right. And just on a side note, remember this whole thing with Snoop Dogg versus Gayle King, and then Snoop Dogg apologizing. Well, this was brought up by Boyce Watkins. Keep in mind, Snoop Dogg has a TV show that's on TNT and VH1 that was cut with Martha Stewart. Well, it's on VH1, excuse me. Uh, and now Gayle King also works with CBS, and those are under the Viacom umbrella. So perhaps that was the reason why Snoop doubled back on those comments because of the money issue. But I'm looking at, that's just a little side note. But then I'm looking at here media cross ownership in the United States. Shawn, if you look at this, and my readers can look at it, I got it in the comment box, the link. These are some companies that own multiple media outlets. AT&T. Holdings include Warner Media, CNN, the CW, a joint venture with CBS, HBO, Cinemax, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, HLN, NBA TV, TBS, TNT, True TV, Turner Classic Movies, AT&T Sports, Warner Brother Pictures, Castle Rock, DC Comics, Audience, Otter Media, uh, I could go on. Comcast, NBC Universal, NBC and Telemundo, Universal Pictures, Illumination, USA Network, Bravo, CNBC, MSNBC, Walt Disney Company. They own all basically ABC television, cable networks, ESPN, the Disney Channel, National Geographic, FX, Lucasfilm, Marvel Entertainment, Walt Disney Pictures. I could go on, but you get the point. It's just yeah, no diversity anymore.
And no diversity of thought. And the big problem with that is when it comes down to content, a lot of these entertainment oligarchs, they are so caught up in them owning so much, they're not thinking about the future. So a lot of these companies, they own so much that it's made them heavy, it's made them sluggish. And the whole media picture has actually gotten worse ever since Comcast bought NBC and Disney bought Fox. So now instead of us having a big six, we're now to a big four. And we are only seeing, again, media that's expressing the viewpoints that was one time, again, of only 6 people. Now we are down to 4 people. And these 4 people are the ones controlling the media and controlling the narrative. And we wouldn't have been to this place had it not been for that Telecommunications Bill of 96, which is practically, just as I see it, destroyed media throughout this country, especially for black people, because when it comes down to black people, we only had a very small slice of the pie. We had some newspapers, some radio stations, and now we have next to nothing now. If it wasn't for YouTube out here, we wouldn't have any voice at all. So it really did a lot of damage, especially to black people, because we lost a lot as related to this law, which allowed these corporations to just come in and buy stuff out. And it's keeping our news from coming to these mainstream media platforms.
What I want to ask you here a quick question. What did you think, because he just retired? I want to ask you about Tom Joyner. Did you ever listen to his thing, or uh, you have any thoughts on him?
I haven't listened to Tom Joyner. I've heard of him, but what happened with him was really sad because when you have a guy who's working with these big six media people and he has a show and there's nobody, and it's not black owned, there's nobody there to take his place. So yes, we had Tom Joyner. He was on the air, but he's gone and there's nobody there to take his place. And then there's nobody there to talk about our issues on those type of platforms. But he wasn't talking about our issues because he was working for those big six media corporate interests, and he was only going to push the narratives they wanted. So in order for him to keep getting a paycheck, he was looking to look out for himself. That's why he probably didn't want to talk about Bill Cosby's issues or anything as related to Me Too or anything as related to any sort of politics as related to candidates. So he was looking to just do what his corporate bosses wanted him to do. So that's one of the big problems of that telecom bill, is that we don't get to see that diversity of thought on the air, or our issues presented on a platform constructively.
Well, from what I learned, Rickey Smiley, comedian, and I actually like Rickey Smiley because he actually, when that Kobe Bryant stuff was going on, he didn't back down from saying Gayle King was wrong, nor as well as Miss Susan Rice, who made that threat to Snoop Dogg. And supposedly he is taken. I think Tom Joyner appointed him as his successor. Although I don't know if Rickey has reached the same level of views or status as Tom, but I do like him. But what you're saying about the corporations are true, that most of our black media are so tied uh, to those big Fortune 500 companies. In some instances, they may be too scared to attack something. And when you look at Tom Joyner, this is another important thing I learned too. Tom Joyner and Bill Cosby were actually frat brothers, as is Rickey Smiley, Omega Psi Phi. And I saw Tom did comment on the Bill Cosby thing, but he basically was saying Cosby should have taken a plea deal, or he should take a plea deal. It was kind of that, they just didn't stand to hear the evidence, due process. And I think that they, were scared of the backlash.
Well, he was scared of losing his job and losing his benefits, or even possibly having his reputation ruined, because that's what happens when you work for corporate America and when you work for big four media. Is if you present viewpoints that they don't want presented, they can practically destroy your career. Now, when we had regulated media, that was a lot harder because there was competition, and if you got rid of somebody, what would happen was the competition would grab them. For example, I remember when Don Imus called those black girls that slur, he was fired from one radio station and then was quickly picked up by another.
Right. He was fired from NBC, and I think he went over to Fox or CBS. I'm not sure.
But that wouldn't happen today because
No.
the Big Six era, there was still a little bit of competition. Now there is no competition whatsoever. I mean, I've watched radio stations here in New York practically die. I mean, I saw radio stations that I was listening to when I was a kid, 95.5 WPLJ. They died, and now they're a Christian radio station. There's a couple of other ones that were around for 40, 50, I mean, some of them 80 years, and they're gone because the corporate owners, they saw they couldn't make any more money off of those stations, so they sold them off. So the big six media, they have practically destroyed media overall. And this bill, people don't see the damage that this bill has done to the media platforms and the world overall. And they don't see the impact that it has had. They just think, that all these companies own all of this media, but them owning this media has really done some damage to the whole picture of how we see ourselves and how we see the world overall.
Yeah, the only black radio station I know that was fully black owned, the talk radio, was WBOK here in New Orleans at 12:30. Danny Bakewell, who was out of Los Angeles, but he was born here in New Orleans, he ended up buying it and restoring it after Katrina. And then subsequently, I think it was recently sold to another company. And I think now Wendell Pierce and a group of I, I think he bought it with a partnership with some other men. They have bought WBOK. Uh, the main R&B station, which is 98.5 WYLD. They also had 940 AM 940 WYLD, which was the gospel channel, and 98.5, I believe, is now owned and operated through iHeartRadio. And 98.5 had talk shows, like tomorrow would be Sunday. We had a program called Sunday Journal that would come on where they would talk about various political and social issues with a brother I know, very good man, Mr. Hal Clark. That has been canceled. They were actually fired or dismissed from their job about a month or two ago, so they're not even doing those type of shows anymore, which have impacted the community. And also, another thing too is it also impacted the music industry because these corporations come in who own these radio stations, and they will delegate to these disc jockeys what they want, heard and streamed out to the market, to the young, and especially to the young folks.
Yeah, that happens because when you have corporations, they want to push their people who they've got under contract. Whereas when we were under the regulated market, you could have independent people going out here and getting their stuff on the air. Because I remember back in the 80s when we were regulated, that's how rap came to the marketplace, because smaller stations like 98.7 KISS FM, they would go out here and play the rap records, and they would play them on the little small local channels, their music videos, and that's how rap started to grow. And when you have these smaller stations that are independently owned, especially the black-owned stations, it allows us, again, to have that voice, and it allows us to get our issues out there. But when you have these corporations come in, they figure they have the money, and because they have the money, they can control the media. When they have the media, they feel they can control the narrative. So they're going to push their agendas and their stuff on a platform. And that's, again, why this telecommunications bill has just done so much damage to our whole country overall.
Right. Let me see, Shawn, I want to know if you can see screen here, if anyone could see it. I'm trying to see if I can zoom in, but I'm going to exit out of it in a second, but I put a shared up here because I want to show everyone. Can you see this? You can?
Yeah, I can.
All right. Can you see me zooming in?
Yeah, I see you zooming in.
All right. Can you read any of this?
Yeah, I can read it. It says Hearst Communications owns a variety of newspapers, magazines, televisions, channels, and television stations, including the San Francisco Chronicle, Houston Chronicle, Cosmopolitan Magazine, Esquire, King Features Syndicate, Print Syndicator, 50% broadcasting of A&E networks, and 20% of ESPN, which is mostly owned by Disney. And those are all the Hearst Communications. iHeartMedia, they have Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Coast to Coast AM, American Top 40, Delilah, Fox Sports Radio. So, and you have Clear Channel. I know about them because they own Z100 here in New York. You got Vince McMahon, who controls WWE, which is a monopoly.
Right.
You have the Meredith Corporation. They control most of the magazines. Originally, that was Time Warner that owned them, but then Warner Brothers sold their Time magazine to Meredith because they were losing money. Warner Brothers has been hemorrhaging money for years because they've just been taking losses. And I know about News Corp owning Fox. I know about Sinclair because I think Sinclair owns Channel 11 here. Salem Media Group, Sirius XM, Sony. They're one of the big four. They own Sony Pictures. They own PlayStation. They also
Sony
own
Music
Sony
Entertainment.
Music, Sony's Film Studios, and I know about Verizon. They own AT&T, AOL, Yahoo. They
Yahoo.
own Tumblr. They used to own Tumblr, but they sold it off. They own Huffington Post, and I've studied all of these because I'm always keeping abreast of who owns who. I'm always reading about who owns who, because I've been studying the media ever since I was about 13 years old. I've been studying ratings ever since I was about 14 years old. I mean, I practically would come to this when I was in high school. I would read the ratings and I would read the TV fall previews, and I could pick the shows that were going to make it and to pick the shows that were going to get canceled. And I used to do that, and I used to be able to just practically pick them, and I would practically be right every time. So I've been studying media for a long time, and when I read about the Telecommunications Bill of '96, and then I watched a documentary on it on Frontline, and it really made me look at our media and how things had changed. And I saw how they were starting to change around 2001 when I saw Channel 5 here in New York and Channel 9 being owned by the same Fox. And instead of us getting this variety and diversity of programming, we started getting these blocks of television shows, one show after the other. And they were putting up like 2 or 3 hours of things like a Frasier or 2 or 3 hours of a King of Queens. And it used to be when there was competition, they would only run one episode. Now they're running like 3 hours of this
Marathon,
stuff.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, and it was very
mini marathon.
And it really wasn't entertaining at all, because it showed that they weren't really about creativity. It was just about them showing how much control they had. And when they did that, what they were doing was slow damage, not only to their own media platform, but they were creating a new media platform, which was the internet, because people got tired of the blocks of programming, the repeat of the same movies, the same viewpoints. And that's why we see so many people migrating to the internet, because they want that diversity of viewpoints and diversity of thought. And television just doesn't want to give it to people. Radio doesn't want to give it to people. The Big Six doesn't want to give it to people. But they can't see that the problem is that law that they lobbied to get is doing more damage to them than it is to anything else. And they get mad at people on the internet for creating media. But the problem is this law was fundamentally flawed, and they don't want to admit that it's flawed.
Right, wholly flawed, certainly. And we see like you say, the impact that it's felt. I do know that former Congressman, I believe it was J.C. Watts, if I'm not mistaken, who is a Republican, conservative, black Republican. I'm not, that doesn't disturb, because honestly, some of our liberals can be even worse. But he launched on February 10th, 2020. They launched a new broadcast channel targeting the African American demographic based in Tallahassee, Florida. It's called the Black News Channel. But of course, I'm looking at it and I see Larry Elder is one of the, I guess, has a show on there, and that already that really turns me off right there, because anything with Larry Elder smells like shit. But I just saw a picture of him. But am I willing to give this an opportunity? Have you heard about this?
I've heard rumors of this Black News Channel, but I haven't seen anything really solid of it. I mean, I would welcome a news channel that presents diversity of thought and diversity of viewpoints about Black people, but it depends on who is running it and who is sponsoring it. That's the most important thing for me, because we really need to really understand that the owner is the most important person, because it's like I state in many of my videos, those who control the money control the media, and those who control the media control the narrative. So having the right person controlling the narrative is imperative, especially for getting on Black media, because a big problem we've had with Black media is we've had these corporate owners who go out here and they only want to promote old stereotypes, or they want to fund people like Tyler Perry who go out here and promote the worst images of Black people.
Tyler Perry, and he is from New Orleans. He's kind of a mixed bag with. I respect I understand he came up homeless, and I respect, I guess, the hustle from where he came from. However, I think that I know his movies are not that great. They're poorly written, and this is just constructive criticism. They're poorly written. If you saw the last movie that he did, you had people basically, aside from the bad wig that he had, the acting in it was meh, one of those. And you had people, in the restaurant eating, and there wasn't anything on their forks and stuff like that. So, and on top of that, too, um, my understanding, I guess, where this comes from is that he even says that he writes his own stuff. So he doesn't have any other writers. He has a television show called Sisters, and there are no black women writing on that program to begin with. And, you know, again, I can respect his money game, but, I don't, his movies are not that great. And I do think that Medea has worn out her welcome to a large degree, because when he started doing that, he had plays initially.
Yes, I know.
Right, and his plays were selling out all across the South, and I did like the plays, but I think where it went wrong with me with the movies, we didn't see, for instance, we saw more of Medea, not more of Daddy's Little Girls, where you saw a black father that was taking care of his children, that was a doting dad despite everything, and he focused more on, I guess, what is his bread and butter, which is putting on uh, that bodysuit with the dress on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, when it comes down to Tyler Perry, the big problem with him I see is that he's just trying to do too much. And that was the problem I had myself. And I remember God telling me that I expected too much of myself. And I acknowledged that, okay, I can't do everything myself. And when you understand that you can't do everything yourself, you're going to start looking to delegate to others and try to give them opportunities. And when I look at Tyler Perry, he's got this issue where he's trying to do everything because he doesn't trust anybody. But when you reach a certain level, you're going to have to start bringing in other people. And he really does need to bring in other black writers to come in and write some of these shows. He needs to bring in other black directors and have them start directing his programs, because the reason why his quality has really been so poor is because he's trying to do everything. And again, he reminds me a lot of myself when I was doing my early SJS Direct books, and I was trying to draw my own covers and do my own editing. And a lot of the quality was not as good as it is today because I started, hiring out to independent artists to do my covers. And I started pulling back on the writing and started taking my time and releasing fewer books. So the quality went up. And Tyler Perry's big problem is he just doesn't trust anyone. And as you're building your business, you want to it can increase your quality, and you want to make better products. And the only way you're going to make better products is by doing things like hiring a writer's room, so you have a pool of screenwriters making fresh stories, and you have a director's pool that is out here making new projects. And if they're making new projects like a Daddy's Little Girls that will make you profits, then you don't have to keep relying on old Medea and a tired old Medea franchise. You have new intellectual properties being created, and you have new intellectual properties constantly being built up so that you don't have to rely on older ones. That was one of the things I was trying to do myself. And if I could further expand, I would definitely want to bring in other talent to do things like covers or do things like graphic novels. Or if I really started bringing in other writers, I tried to bring in another writer, Lawrence Cherry, a while back, but he was really busy with work. He was doing pretty well with his commencement series, but he couldn't continue to do the projects for so long. So I couldn't bring that author, keep that author on. His books are still in my catalog, but he hasn't done anything new in a while. He's trying to do something now, but the whole thing is you can't do everything yourself. And Tyler Perry's big problem is he just sits there trying to do everything. And a leader has to understand that you have to be able to delegate tasks to others. You have to be able to just let those people go and do what they need. And they want to bring you their best, but you have to give them an opportunity to do that. And Tyler Perry, he doesn't give people that opportunity. Instead, he wants to just have all of this power, not understanding that you have a studio, but the only way you're going to keep that studio is if you bring new, fresh talent in and allow that talent to develop and grow, especially the talent behind the camera. Because I see a lot of great directors out there who are ready for their shot at a feature film. Like I was looking at Sally Richardson Whitfield's work on the TV show she does, like Luke Cage, and the visuals she does, and I think she's ready to do her first feature film. And there's a lot of other small screenwriters who I know
Gorgeous
are.
woman, by the way, too.
Yes, she's a very attractive woman, but she's a very talented director, and she's ready to do a feature film, I believe, because she's done a lot of great television episodes. And Tyler Perry could easily bring her in to do some directing on a film. And there's a lot of great screenwriters like myself and yourself out there who have great scripts that he could do. And again, these are going to be projects that he didn't write, but these are projects that are going to bring money into the studio that allow it to build revenue and allow it to grow.
Right. And on the Sally Richardson part, I mentioned that because Sally, the first time I remember seeing her was she was in the movie Posse with Mario Van Peebles, where that was about the black cowboys. And I think that was directed by the Hutland brothers.
That was Mario Van Peebles.
Okay, but they were in the movie in the end.
Yeah, they were.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was Van Peebles because he just finished doing New Jack City. And he did Panther. And we haven't seen Mario Van Peebles in a while. I know he directed an episode of Power recently. But Sally Richardson, I've seen her names in different television credits. And I think what we're saying about Tyler too is that you can give other people an opportunity to write. People who are hungry, they can help you write screenplays. And when you just say, well, I do everything, I do it all, you're not giving other people an opportunity to have their break. I mean, it's his show, it's his studios and so forth, but the quality of those are not that great. Although, he obviously has been making a lot of money from it. Although I think part of it is based on the fact that he does push old stereotypes.
Yeah.
But speaking of directors, I did want to ask you this. Recently, this past week, I wanted to know your thoughts about Spike Lee's comments on Bill Cosby. He claimed that Bill Cosby stole the idea of a different world from him from School Days.
I believe that's absolutely ridiculous because anybody who understands the entertainment business knows that that's just not possible. Back in those days, usually if something got greenlit, usually that concept was already registered with the WGA and possibly the Copyright Office in the treatment or the Bible phase. So Bill Cosby's A Different World came out. It was being developed as far as I think 1986 or so. And your Spike Lee's School Days came out in 1988, I believe. And I know that A Different World, because I was 14 years old, it came out in September of 1987. So that means Bill Cosby was developing this concept all the way back as far as about 1986 or so. So there's no way he could have stolen that concept from Spike Lee. And I believe Spike and Bill weren't really even traveling in the same circles. I mean, Bill Cosby was an A-list performer, but moreover, the creative process in the entertainment industry, it just doesn't allow for that to happen because usually, again, you have to submit your treatment, you have to submit your series Bible, you have to submit your sample scripts. I know all about these processes because I was writing my scripts for the TV show All About Nikki and that fabulous first season, that whole book I was writing. And I know about writing all of those different things. And if Bill was working on those things, he was probably working on those things even as far back as 1985. And because these Bibles, they're at least about 300-400 pages, and they feature depictions of all of the characters. They feature all of the storylines for the season. They picture all the settings, all the designs. It's a lot of work that goes into a series Bible. And if Bill Cosby and the people who were working with him were working on that was going to take about a year or two just to put together by himself. Now, Spike was probably working on a screenplay for School Days at the same time, coincidentally. And this happens all the time. You're working on concepts that are similar, but a screenplay is very different than a television series.
Right. If
television
that's the
series.
case, right. I'm not to cut you off, but if that's the case, then he should sue the creators of Stump the Yard.
Yeah,
Uh, that came out 20 years after School Days. So Clifton Powell got on Spike Lee because he talked about how Spike Lee treated the actors and actresses that would come to audition, not even paying for their flights, and coincidentally, Spike Lee was criticizing Tyler Perry, and Clifton Powell told Spike Lee to sit his punk ass down and threatened to beat him up.
yeah. But there's no way that Bill Cosby could have stolen from him. I mean, in order for him to get that green light in 1987, he would have had to have been working on this for a while. So
Right.
he came out with this movie in 88. So he was probably working on that script in 86, which is probably just in the first draft. So I know about green lights, and it takes a while to get through. And if he got that released in 88, they were filming in 87. So
Right.
they were filming at the same time.
And some of the actors on Different World were in School Days, but
Yeah,
I don't think that relates to Bill. Oh, Bill Cosby stole that idea.
he
I
didn't
think
steal
that
it.
no, and Spike Lee was not even a fucking known director at that time. His biggest movie was what at that time? She's Gotta Have It.
Yeah,
That was it. I know he was doing the commercials with Michael Jordan, so he was really
he was an up
you
and
know,
comer.
up and coming. So I don't believe that. And I think since Spike has gotten that Oscar,
Yeah,
he's been on a tangent because now he's been talking about Trump and the Asian community. I saw he tweeted something, and I know he did something a few years ago about the bathroom bill. And I think he tried in Carolina when they were trying to pass that bill uh, to keep it your biological sex that you were born with, you had to use that required bathroom, and Spike was critical of that. And the NBA actually moved the All-Star game out of that out of North Carolina because of that. And Spike said something, so he's been caping hard, for other communities. I've noticed, and I respect Spike Lee, but I think he's just going too far with that shit.
well, I respect his work, but when I take a critical examination of him and this incident, it's clear to me that he's just pulling a stunt to try to stay relevant,
Yeah,
because it's clear to me that he just does not want to go out here and work on a new project to stay relevant. What he wants to do is try to create some controversy using Bill Cosby's name, which is really just shows how desperate he is, because if he truly believed in his talent, he would come out here and make another movie or something about black colleges, or tell a story about black colleges from a different perspective. I mean, that's what he would be doing right now. He wouldn't be sitting there attacking Bill Cosby, but I think he's attacking Bill Cosby because he wants brownie points from the same people who gave him that Oscar.
right. That's Motel. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it is. And and keep in mind also when Spike did Malcolm X, and I know we talked about that the last time you were here. Malcolm X, which was produced by Warner Brothers, if I'm not mistaken,
It was.
distributed by Warner Brothers.
It was. I have the DVD.
Right. It was distributed by Warner Brothers. Well, during production, Warner Brothers had stopped funding the movie, and Spike was trying to finish the movie, and he did not have the money to finish it. So, guess who he called to help him?
Yeah, he called Bill Cosby.
He called Bill Cosby, and he got Oprah Winfrey. He also had Oprah Winfrey, Janet Jackson,
Yep.
Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan. But Bill Cosby made sure that movie was funded. So Bill Cosby really did a lot to help up and comers, to
Yeah.
help black
I
directors.
remember when he helped Melvin Van Peebles with Sweetback, and
Yes,
he actually practically opened the door for the entire black film industry, because that Sweetback opened the door for everybody.
right. Because then after that, Sweetback, which came out in '71, that's considered the first blaxploitation film.
Yep.
That opened the door for Gordon Parks to do Shaft, and you had Cotton Comes to Harlem with Ossie Davis that directed that. That
Yep.
movie, by the way, was the reason why Red Fox got cast as Fred Sanford.
Yeah,
Right.
because all of it with Bill Cosby opened a lot of doors for people, but I don't like the way he's being treated right now because just it's not giving him the respect that he deserves. And to see Spike turn on him like that, that was just egregious.
Yeah, he's low hanging fruit, just like R. Kelly.
Yeah.
Right, he's low hanging fruit. Now, another thing we're trying to do, Shawn. Uh, I don't know if you saw, but they ruled. Speaking of R. Kelly, he was trying to get out of jail, federal prison, because of the coronavirus, and the judge denied him bail. I don't know if you know this, but Michael Avenatti has just been released from prison based off of the coronavirus pandemic. That news just came out
Yeah.
today.
I read that on Facebook, and it just shows me the double standards in our so-called criminal justice system. I mean, Bill Cosby, an elderly man, is still in jail. R. Kelly, a man with several debilitating illnesses, he's still in jail. Meanwhile, we have pedophiles, we have all sorts of assorted criminals running around. And from what I've read in several articles, they have gone back to reoffend but your Bill Cosby can't get out of jail. It just shows me that even in the face of a pandemic, white supremacists are still practicing racism.
Oh, absolutely. They never stop. And I did see the governor, very interesting. I didn't read the whole article, but I believe Governor Wolf out in Pennsylvania is considering releasing uh, inmates. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know how that relates to, you know, I'm hoping that Mr. Cosby is on that list because really, if you saw my interview with Tom Mesereau
Yeah.
on last week, you got a chance to see it?
I'm going to take a look at it after I get off the stream. I'm going to take a look at it.
Yeah, well, I did interview him and talked about that, and he, personally told me how that was the most unfair trial he was ever part of, and he, praised for Mr. Cosby and his family. But it was clearly political, and and like I say again, he's low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
He was the poster boy for this Me Too, so and that's why it's important that we have shows like this
Yeah.
here on YouTube so we can discuss talking points like that.
Because
Now,
New Black Media is the only place you're going to get actual narratives that help Black people. Mainstream Black media, you're not going to really hear anything because it's corporate owned.
right. Did you see I didn't see it, but I heard stories about it, but the Revolt emergency that came out on Diddy's Revolt television network where they were talking about getting, I guess, blacks out to vote with the coronavirus pandemic. Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard about that. What happened?
Well, what was going on is that from the news articles that I wrote, Kamala Harris was there. Diddy does this, I think, every year, but especially around election time. He had Al Sharpton, Angela Rye, Van Jones, and a few others, I guess, speak to an audience, virtual. I think this was all virtual, of course, about the emergency 2020, and I guess gearing people up for the elections that are coming up this year. Because everything, of course, when these guys come out, they try to get blacks to vote for the Democratic Party, clearly. And, they're basically, I'm not going to say Diddy necessarily is a shill, but I'm just saying in general what I've noticed from several news heads that I see on CNN, they're certainly shills for the Democratic Party. Angela Rye in particular, and I haven't heard anything good about her. But your Al Sharpton, clearly, who's on MSNBC in the morning. I didn't even know his show was still on. But they all talked, and I think they talked about the coronavirus pandemic, and I believe they talked about voting and so forth. I'm going to pull up the actual article. But Diddy hosted a live COVID-19 town hall, and they call it the state of emergency, the state of Black America and coronavirus, that aired Thursday. And this was a 2-hour event. He also had Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I think this woman has even talked about giving emergency benefits to illegal immigrants during this time.
That sounds like a complete joke, and that's why I could see why Black people are revolting, because they see that why should we continue to rally to vote for these people, and they don't want to even consider us one as anybody they want to take on for our own agenda. They always want to lump us in with minorities. And then two, they don't want to talk about anything as related to tangibles. So I understand why there are a lot of people are now trying to revolt against these whole vote campaigns, because they don't see what they're voting for. Because again, voting is something people do in order to get something in exchange for a vote. And most Black people now are demanding more for their votes than just showing up and supporting the candidate because they say they support Black people. They're no longer taking their votes for granted. They are demanding something in exchange for it, because they look at your hope and change from Barack Obama, seeing that they didn't get any hope and change. And they're saying to themselves, if we want, what we want are something tangible from these candidates. We want tangible policy. We want tangible resources. We want tangible things like earmarks for government programs and funding. We want tangibles. And if you want our vote, you're going to have to bring something to the table other than yourself, because the sad part is many of these politicians, they on both sides have been taking the Black vote for granted. And now you have Black people demanding more of their vote. And that's why these shills, they're not really able to come in here and just show up and just say, hey, we're here. Black people vote for us. Black people are saying, no, if you want our votes, you're going to have to bring something tangible to the table.
And every other ethnic group aside from our community do that.
Yeah.
The Asian community has the smallest voter turnout every year, and yet they control all of the economics in our community.
Yeah.
We go to their gas stations, we go to their chicken stands, their stores where they, I'm being real with you.
I live in a neighborhood. I see it myself. I mean, I go right around the corner, and Arabs control most of the grocery stores in the neighborhood on the block where I am, and Asians control the Chinese restaurants. And because of COVID-19, there's no Chinese restaurants open anywhere in the neighborhood. And
now we're the face of this. We're starting to become the face of this.
And that's just, I saw that coming early on. I saw that like 3 weeks ago. I saw them trying to change the narrative to make it Black. And I wanted to make a video on it, but I was busy doing other things. I was working on some stories, but I saw them changing that narrative slowly and insidiously. And they want to make it a Black thing. But again, the facts are there. And people on the other, I watched on other YouTube videos. I watched several of these other guys, and they're saying they know it comes from China and there's no way they can get around it. But what they want to do is use their media platforms to change the narrative and make it a Black issue. And it has nothing to do with us. We didn't create the virus. We didn't import the virus because we didn't get on the planes to go overseas. We don't
travel like that.
Yeah. We don't travel. Can't even afford to travel like that. Most of us don't make that kind of money.
And by that, it's not to be stereotypical and say that all Black people can travel. Of course we can, but in groups, and especially to go in places like that.
And like Chinese New Year, we don't go to those places for that.
And they were upset, of course, calling it the Wuhan and the Chinese virus, but they have no problem using terms like West Nile virus, which obviously is in Africa. They talked about the Black Plague, which they always use racial connotations when it comes to us, but when it's other minority groups, it's a problem. And as far as go ahead,
and that's because the reason why they're trying to downplay it, because they get so much money from China, so they don't really want to alienate these companies over there, and they don't alienate these companies because they want to keep that free trade going and that cheap labor going. So that's why they don't want to alienate them. But most people know that the virus came from them. You can't escape a fact. You can't escape it. But now they're trying to make it a Black narrative. I'm thinking about doing a video on that tomorrow, or I might do it on Monday, but it's coming.
What do you use? You have CyberLink PowerDirector when you do your videos? Or?
I just use Apple's, Photo Booth.
Okay. iMovie. Well, I mean, when you do the introduction to your books and you do a video.
I do that on, I do the voice on Photo Booth, and then I move that over to iMovie. I split the audio, and then I just put a picture up there. And then I go get some YouTube stock music, download that to iTunes. And then I record it that way.
I'm still trying to learn because I got some studio equipment now. I just don't want to do live stream. I want to make it a little more professional when I do videos.
Well, it takes time. I mean, I've been working with Apple's basic equipment for a while now. I don't do anything too fancy. And I just used, because I had my old 2011 MacBook, I was using the iMovie that was on there. And then when we raised funds in the Shawn James initiative, I got this other MacBook. I got the iMovie, and I'm just doing the same thing. But I'm learning as I go. I mean, one of these days I'm going to try to get a ring light or something. Instead of using a regular lamp, I'm going to try to get a ring light for the videos. I mean, I got a microphone I'm using right now, but I usually just use a simple setup to make my videos, just do it straight in the bedroom. And that's just how I've been working for the last, 7 years now?
Yeah. Right. I've seen some of those old videos, bro.
Yeah.
That you had. Yeah.
Yeah. The ones in the other apartment, that was a really tight apartment. This one, I have a lot more space. I mean, that one was like, it was like 11 by 13 room, and it was really tight.
Right. And you had the kid and play haircut.
Yeah. That was when I had the high top fade. I cut it down a little in recent years, but it was really cramped in there.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do, man. I mean, I'm relaxed here. I'm doing this in my bedroom. My studio that I have problems with the internet. So, guys, I'm comfortable here. So I got the fan on, and sometimes I just stream like that, yeah, man. So everybody.
I've been streaming like that for 2 years. I'm going on 2 years now, and this year, like January, was 2 years when I did my first stream. So I've been doing the videos like this for a while and doing the streams. Trying to wait for them to do some work in the apartment before I switch back to the other way I had it of making videos. But I have a lot more room than I had before. Now, if I really were to start taking off, I'd probably get another apartment or another house and have a whole room dedicated for a studio.
Maybe so. When you get your first screenwriter's check.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know if you're gonna get it in Paramount since we've been talking about them so bad right now.
No, I've been talking about all these guys for about 5 years. I've been talking about these guys for years. So,
did you know? I'm sorry. Did you know that Michael was trying to buy Marvel?
I didn't know.
Yes, in the 90s, he and Stan Lee, Michael Jackson, they had talked about buying Marvel Comics together.
Oh.
And he tried to buy Universal. I'm sorry. He also tried to buy Universal Pictures. So you couple that with the Beatles catalog and owning half of Sony, he would have been a trillionaire.
He would have been a major media power player. And that's one of the reasons why they didn't like Michael Jackson, because he was making these moves, but he was also making these moves very quietly. I mean, he was building wealth, and he was building wealth very quietly, and they didn't like the idea of him owning things like Beatles catalog. They didn't like the idea of him owning major catalogs because they don't like the idea of wealth being in a black man's hands. It's similar to what I saw in the movie The Banker. When they saw him starting to build that wealth, they had a problem with it. They didn't mind him being rich. They didn't mind him owning these buildings and just living well. But when he started talking about giving economic power to others, they had a problem with him.
Right, most definitely. I saw that movie. It was probably one of the best movies I saw this year. Another good movie to watch wasn't a black movie, but the Hunt, which was on demand now. It was pretty good because it had dealt with basically conservative versus liberal. They put it in a black comedy type of thing.
Yeah.
But you could check that out. But they definitely don't like a black man building wealth. They especially don't like a black man who stands up. And I go now to the video I did a couple of weeks ago. You commented on it. It was about the brother T.C. Carson, who was on the hit show Living Single back in the 90s. I don't know if you saw the comedy hype video. I
haven't seen it, but I saw Mr. Superboy's video on T.C. Carson. And I would always wondered about his abrupt departure from Living Single. But now that I've heard about it, it fits right in line with everything that's happened to every other black man who stands up for himself. It's like John Amos, who stood up on good times. They got rid of him. And Esther Rolle, who stood up. Everybody who tries to stand up for black people, they always try to get rid of. And what happened to T.C. Carson is what happens. Usually they just want you to sit down, shut up, and do your job and promote whatever they want them to promote. But when the minute you start wanting input, that's when they want to get you off the stage.
Yeah, and he was actually one of the positive highlights of that show, which you had. I mean, they were all great actors. All of them were professionals.
Yeah.
In a show. Queen Latifah's character owning a magazine, and her cousin working with her, and
Yeah.
you had the black friend across the street that was an attorney. The other friend that lived in the house, the apartment had a boutique,
Yep.
and the two brothers, which John Henton, who was uh, he was the handyman in the building, but also T.C. Carson was this investment banker who was dressed suave. He had
Yeah.
confidence. He was Afrocentric,
He
and
was representing power, and they didn't like that.
they did not like that. And that brings up this is that all of the black television shows that you saw in the late 80s and early 90s that built up these networks, like Fox, for instance, having In Living Color, having Living Single, Martin, uh, New York Undercover. You know, we don't have shows like that anymore. And
And we're worse off because of it. I mean, those type of
right,
shows, they practically defined the generation I grew up in. I mean, I grew up starting with Benson and the Cosby Show, and I mean, yeah, I saw Good Times and What's Happening, but it was shows like Benson, Cosby Show, Different World, and
Amen,
Amen, all these shows that showed
227,
you, yeah, Family Matters. I remember
Fresh
TGIF,
Prince.
3 of the 4 shows, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Sister, and Family Matters was 75% black at one time before they brought in Boy Meets World and Step by Step. I remember when it was a 75% black block. And if it wasn't for those black shows, many of these networks would have died a long time ago. I mean, Fox was teetering, and the only thing they had going for them was The Simpsons. But if it wasn't for In Living Color, they really wouldn't have started that road to becoming a solid, stable network. Some people will say it was 90210, but it really was In Living Color, and it really was that Thursday night block that really made Fox a contender and a real competitor.
Right. Fox had Married with Children.
Yeah, they had that, but I remember when that show was in the 90s in the ratings. I remember
Yeah.
reading the ratings. Remember that show was just at the bottom, but A Living Color was the show that really started bringing their numbers up. The Simpsons was their one hit, but A Living Color had consistent numbers, and that allowed them to further build their block with shows like Rock and Martin and all these other shows.
Rock was a great show.
And Rock was a show that did not get its respect. When I look at Rock today, I mean, that's a masterpiece of a show. It never really got the accolades it should have gotten. I mean, the performances on that show were incredible. The comedy was well done. The writing was well done.
Acting,
The acting was top notch. Charles S. Dutton, he put on a master class. But that show never really got what it deserved. And the whole thing is that all those shows, black shows, built up Fox. But when they started seeing Melrose Place become popular, that's when they wanted to abandon the black audience. So they saw, I think it was Melrose Place. There was a couple of them because I remember I used to watch the Fox. There's a whole bunch because they
21 Jump Street.
Yeah, 21 Jump Street. That was like a moderate hit, but it was really Melrose Place that they started blowing up.
Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah, 90210. It was 90210 and Melrose Place, and that's when they wanted to start abandoning the black audience. But if it wasn't for the black audience, many of these networks wouldn't have taken off. I mean, I remember UPN, they started off with Malcolm and Eddie and Girlfriends, and there was a whole bunch of black shows. And if it wasn't for those black shows, they'd have no audience. Same thing with WB. They started off with Wayans Brothers, Jamie Foxx, Smart Guy, Parenthood. And those were the shows that brought them up. But once they got Buffy, they wanted to get rid, and Dawson's Creek, they wanted to get rid of the black audience.
Yeah. I remember I grew up like late, like I can remember 89. And I remember Family Matters when it started. I remember 227 and Amen, which were on NBC.
Yeah.
And those were actually good quality shows. And NBC, as we spoke about the last time we did this interview, when we spoke together here, we talked about how Cosby saved NBC from basically bankruptcy.
Yeah, because I remember back in 83, 82, 83, NBC was dying. NBC was a dying network. If it wasn't for Bill Cosby coming in, they would have practically been the first network to go out of business because that's how bad they were. I mean, again, all they had was Different Strokes, Facts of Life, and Knight Rider. And the shows like Yeah, Give Me a Break. And Cheers and Night Court were actually at the lowest ratings. They were like 92, 93. And if it wasn't for Cosby coming in, those shows wouldn't have gotten up to that top 10 status. It was Cosby that carried all those shows and then allowed them to get that resurgence that made them the number one network all the way from 1984 to about 1996, I believe. Even before, even longer than that, because they had Frasier and Seinfeld. So they got dominance, but they only got dominance because of Cosby. And when Cosby left, they wanted him to do the same thing at CBS, and he did bring their numbers up a bit for them to start building their lineup with King of Queens and Everybody Loves Raymond. And Cosby saved two networks because CBS was also in the garbage for a good long time. I mean, I remember when they had shows like Dr. Doctor and The Flash that were dying in the ratings. And if it wasn't for Bill Cosby coming in with Cosby, they would have fallen off too, because they had just came off losing Dallas and Knots Landing, and they needed something to give them a boost. And it was Bill Cosby that brought them back in the game.
Right. Most definitely. I think the only thing they had working for them was Walker, Texas Ranger.
That was about it.
That was my grandmother's show.
That network was dying. I remember when 1990, I remember looking at the numbers because they had just canceled Dallas. They were just about to cancel Knots Landing, and they were doing pretty bad because they had lost, because the soap craze had gone over, and they were in a bad spot. They were running weak shows like Dr. Doctor and all these other type of shows, and they had just lost Newhart, so they were in a bad place until Cosby came along.
Right. And I remember TGIF was really my thing as a kid.
Yeah.
Because those were all funny, and there was also a moral to the story afterwards that you learned. Family Matters was actually a spinoff of
Perfect Strangers.
Right. And Harriet's character had worked at the newspaper company that Balky and got the cousin's name.
Larry. And she was the elevator operator, and they spun her off into her own show.
And of course, it wasn't her own show. It was
it wasn't her own show, but it was like they used her character to spin the show off.
Yeah.
And Reginald Vell Johnson had just fresh hot off Die Hard.
Right. And then they brought in this nerd in one episode who was supposed to be just a one-time character. And because he was so popular, the college students that came to visit the show were chanting his name, Urkel. And subsequently, he saved that show from cancellation, Jaleel White. Because that was on the brink of cancellation, and it also improved ABC's numbers because that was a pop culture phenomenon, right? Every Friday,
Yeah, I had bought a box of that cereal back when it came out. I had some Urkel O's. I had the box for a while.
I didn't have Urkel O's, but I think my cousin had the Urkel doll.
Yeah, but I remember that show practically again saved their Friday night. Now, they had Full House, but that show, once Full House left, that was the foundation for TGIF for most of the 90s.
Right. And then subsequently, they brought on Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Two of a Kind, and those shows didn't last. I know Sabrina lasted a little longer, but, what's that? Two of a Kind didn't last that long. And then, of course, they got Home Improvement later.
Yeah.
So, they don't make stuff like that no more. That's what makes them special. And I think now is the time, though, if we want to see shows like that, we can look into how much it costs, number one, to make a network.
Yeah.
And even if not to start small, what about a streaming service? There's platforms like Brown Sugar.
Yeah.
I know they do blaxploitation. I don't know if they're black owned. A streaming service, how much does that cost? Because we could start showing our content. We could start, and when we say that they're not doing anything for us, well, we can do for ourselves.
That's what I try to do with the SJS Direct imprint. I'm always focused on what I can do because I figure they're not going to do it. So that's one of the reasons why I write my own stories and create my own platform, because I know I can't expect them to produce our stories. And if I've got money, then I can create my own media and create my own narrative, because that's what John H. Johnson did back in the 1940s with Ebony magazine. He saw they weren't making magazines that featured our stories, so he made a magazine featuring our stories. And it's up to us to pick up that baton from where they left off and continue on in the legacy of guys like John H. Johnson, Bill Cosby, Robert Townsend, and many others, because if we don't do it, no one else will.
Right. Speaking of which, we do have to. I'll do a video on this too later. But rest in peace to Mr. Earl Graves Sr., founder of Black Enterprise magazine. He
Yeah.
started that 50 years ago. He just died this past week at 85 years old. He leaves a hell of a legacy.
I'm sorry to hear about his passing, because Black Enterprise helped a lot of Black people see the people behind the scenes who were in business and show us those Black faces that were working in these companies.
Yeah, they have. Although I think they have changed drastically from what they were, because I don't know if you know this, but a few months ago they tried to blow up Roland Martin's
That
YouTube
was
page.
I think that's because they probably, I don't know who's owning them now, but that was a mistake. I mean, Roland Martin has lost all credibility.
Roland Martin is a jerk.
I know he's a joke. I mean,
No,
I've seen
he's a
him.
jerk.
I know he's a jerk, but he's a joke too, because I saw him in that
Yeah.
dashiki. He looks like a clown.
Well, I've actually met him personally, and it's Easter. Let me watch my But he tried to attack, of course, new Black media like us,
Yeah.
and a few other people, because Tariq Nasheed lights into him all the time. He doesn't hold anything back when it comes to Roland Martin. But on any note, but on a new note, yeah, man. But what other projects? You got some new books you're writing? Before we get out of here, is there something you want to plug in?
Well, all I'm going to do is plug the books that I currently have on the marketplace right now. I think I'll plug the new, what is it, John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. This is the variant version. This is available in paperback on Amazon.com. And I also have, let's see, it's right here. John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, the regular version done by Mike Williams. This is on the camera. This is available on Amazon.com. And I have ISIS, the main event, which is available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. Both of these books are now available on Amazon. And I'm hoping everybody comes to pick up, especially ISIS, the main event. This just came out this week, and I'm trying to get the sales up for ISIS, the main event. Most of the SJS Direct books in the universe are all ages, family-friendly entertainment, so you can feel safe about giving this from everybody from 8 to 80. So that's what I'm going to be plugging for tonight, and I'll leave a link to it, both of those books in the chat. But I do African American fan. I have other two books. They're still in editing phase. E-Steam, what is it? Blast from the Past is in editing. I'm still waiting for Bill Walker to get the art to me.
Okay.
The ISIS, the main event, I dropped in the chat link to that one, and you can pick that one up. That's all. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read that one for free, and you can get John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. Everybody loves this book. I just got a feedback from a guy on Instagram who told me how much he loved it.
All right. Everyone, you guys check out my brother and friends Shawn James books, ISIS, on Amazon.com, as well as The Man Crisis. That's the one that I have from you that I have an order of books that I'm going into. Right now, I'm going to finish the Heard You Paint Houses, and that
I'll leave a link to The Man Crisis too.
Yeah, leave a link to The Man Crisis as well.
Everybody loves that one too. So I put all of those links in the chat.
That's relevant now,
Yeah. And I just did a stream on The Man Crisis yesterday. I have that in front of me right now. I just did a stream on that one. And I was talking about Dondra T. Whitfield's new book, Male versus Man, which is a fantastic book. I mean, Dondra T. Whitfield really did an amazing job on that book. And to say it's his first book, he did a fantastic job. Meticulous research on that book. Very well crafted. I mean, Dondra, I sent him a thing on Instagram, let him know I did a review for it. And I did promotion for it because I liked what he put in that book. He did a great job on that book.
And what's the name of his book?
Male versus Man. I'm gonna put a link to it.
Oh, by the way, Shawn, do you have a page that anyone could go to look at? If they wanted to buy their books directly from you, do you have a?
I don't have a page. I have an Amazon page, but I don't have a direct page.
I got you.
So I have an Amazon page. I do most of my business through Amazon because I just don't have the space to warehouse all these books. So you can get all my books on Amazon. So all my books are listed on Amazon. There's over 70 titles. I put a link to the Shawn James page there. So I usually just direct people to the page because I have people asking me to do shows and cons, but I that's one of the goals I wanted to do before this pandemic. I had a plan to do a show or a con where I was going to bring ISIS series books, E-Steam series books, John Haynes series books, Spinsterella, even some Man Crisis to a Comic-Con, but everything's up in the air right now. I had plans to do a show, but we'll see.
And that's the book right there on Amazon that you were talking about by Dondre T. Woodfield.
Yeah, that's the book. That's Male versus Man. It's a great book, and I urge everybody to pick it up.
All right, let's see if we got a few comments right quick before we go. Chris Brown says, "You know Chris Brown?"
Yeah, I know him. He creates Omega Black. I promote his
manga. I
manga.
thought it was the other one. Sorry.
I promote his manga on every one of my streams. He's a fantastic guy, and his manga is fantastic. And he's doing an Indiegogo, and he has me editing the Omega Black script. I got to get back to that in addition to my other projects because I'm doing ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess right now. I'm like in the first act is finished. I'm getting ready to do the second act.
I thought it was the Chris Brown, but
no, this is Chris L. Brown. He's going to be just as big as the original Chris Brown. His talent is just that great. I
believe you. All right, what's up, Chris? Thank you for joining the chat, and please subscribe if you're here. The lovely T-Pen, she says Ocasio-Cortez is problematic. Yes and no, a token VP pick. I believe you, my dear.
Yeah, AOC, she represents my district, and I definitely, if I vote, I'm going to vote against her because she's not out for anybody's interest. She's just out to get attention for herself.
Yeah, she goes on RuPaul Drag Race reality show. Yeah, she's one of those, I guess, those people that run on popularity.
Yeah. But she's not interested in representing people of this neighborhood, and she's not interested in a better quality of life because in this neighborhood where I'm living, Parkchester, we've had a lot of businesses closed even before the pandemic, and we have a quality of life that's not as good as it could be. She's just basically taking people for granted, and she's just running her mouth more than she is serving the people. She's more serving herself than anything else.
Seems like an idiot too.
Yeah, she's an imbecile.
Yeah. And some of these other, I have to say it, I hate it breaks my heart, but some of this Congressional Black Caucus, I just got to talk about them. What have they done in just I won't even say 20 years, let's say 10 years. What exactly have they done for the Black community?
Absolutely nothing.
Not a damn thing. This guy that just died, Elijah Cummings, if you looked at his Twitter feed, everything he talked about was either for illegal immigrations or Donald Trump. Everything against Trump, everything in support of illegal immigrations, nothing specifically about Black people. I'm sorry.
He didn't say anything about Black tangibles at all.
Not one thing, and I never even saw, and John Lewis is the same way. I respect, what he did in Selma, but I'm sorry, I can't just vote for you just because you got your butt whipped in Selma.
But what is he doing? What is he doing now? That's the critical question.
That's the question, right? I gave up. He keeps and he uses that as a talking point. If you listen to his when he goes and campaigns for John, I guess he's going to be voting for Joe Biden. Or any other campaigns, he's always mentioning that. And that's a big problem with the old Black media because they keep pushing that narrative with no tangibles. And you can't tell young people to vote based on fear anymore. That's the only reason why Blacks are going out to, two reasons Black people go out to vote. fear and because of tradition. You know,
And
Martin Luther King would have wanted this.
we need more than that. We need more than fear and tradition. We
Right.
really need tangibles, and we need leaders who are going to be accountable to go out here and bring tangibles. If they cannot be accountable for bringing tangibles, we have no reason to vote for them.
Absolutely none. And shout out to Lindell Moore. Brother Lindell says exactly the CBC is not working on our behalf. Brother Moore has been and says he didn't get my notification. I don't. YouTube does a lot of BS with this stuff, but I did this through StreamYard. But yeah, please check out the replay and also donate to the channel as well. You can see the flyer if anybody can. But shout out to all my followers on here on YouTube. And also follow Shawn. He has a self-entitled YouTube channel, it's Shawn James. And you can look up his books. You can also donate to his channel as well. He has CashApp. He has Patreon. Uh, I believe you have PayPal as well, Shawn.
Yes, I do. And the PayPal is directed to my business email. I'll put that all up in the chat. You get to it. I'm gonna put my Cash App up first. So if you want to donate to the Cash App, you can donate to my Cash App. I just put that in there. And I have a PayPal where you can donate via PayPal to can help me continue making shows and streams. This is how I do things. So the PayPal, you can send it to the email of sjsdirectamerica@gmail.com. And you can also donate to my Patreon as well. So I often, again, that's all, they're all there. I put the Patreon there, the PayPal, the Cash App. So I give people different options.
Okay. You guys check out Shawn James's channel and support him. And please support your brother. Thank you for supporting me, Shawn. It's good to talk with you about this. I will have and let people know I am working on a couple of books as we speak. I'm in the early process of it. Hopefully, things will be, it'll definitely be released before the end of 2020 at least. So I know that for sure. But it's writing a book, and Shawn knows this is a long process.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of research.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you, man. Anytime you want to come on, you let me know.
I'll be glad to do that.
All right. We'll probably have to do one on the comic book industry, I guess.
That's one I'm looking forward to doing. I've been doing a lot of videos and streams on comic book industry. I'll be glad to do that with you.
I just started before you go. I just started watching Black Lightning. I'm actually in the first season.
I left around the first season because of all the identity politics.
I see that. I started seeing that in the first really in the first episode. Although there's a message behind some of it, I'm trying to weigh that. Yeah. But definitely we'll talk more about it. And it's great for you to come on the show. And thank you again, guys. This is GBoo2786, Gavin Richard Presents. I am your gracious host. Have a good night. Happy Easter to you. And happy Easter, Shawn.
Happy Easter. And thank you.
Yeah, and you guys be safe and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Okay? Peace.